Okay, going back up to the menu bar and talking about some of the other items that are here. Image is one, and image mode is going to be one of the first things I'm always going to recommend that you do when you're working with a file that you didn't create. So if somebody sends you a photo and they're wanting you to make edits to it or add text or whatever it might be, the very first thing you should always do is figure out what mode you're working in. So there are actually two color modes. And right now, the one that's highlighted is called RGB color. The other one that's most common is called CMYK color. So you have two color modes, RGB and CMYK. Now, obviously, there's more color modes than that, as you can tell by this list, but the two most common are these two, RGB and CMYK color. So I'm going to pause for just a second, switch back over to a note screen. That way you can see some of the things that I'm going to be talking about here. And this is a good time that you might want to take some notes because some variation of this content is going to be on the online quiz. So we have two color modes that we just talked about. One, which is what our current photo is in, is called RGB, which stands for red, green, and blue. Then the second color mode is called CMYK. And that stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And CMYK is also sometimes referred to as a 4-color process. Which means that we want to work in CMYK anytime our end product is going to be printed. And specifically professionally printed. RGB, on the other hand, we want to work with when our end product is going to be seen only on the web, or more specifically, just on a monitor. So it could be for a mobile app, could be for a PowerPoint presentation, anything that's not going to get typically printed. Now, in the rule of working in these color modes, however, even though your end product might be professionally printed and you now know that it should be CMYK before you print it, you're always going to start off in RGB. And the reason is because there are certain features that get turned off once you convert an image into CMYK. So in order for you to have full access to the entire software, you're going to start off in RGB, then convert it to CMYK once you're 100% finished with it, if your end goal is to have it professionally printed. Now, that being said, one of the things that you have to pay attention to when you're working in these various color modes is this concept called gamut. And gamut is just a fancy word for saying range of color. The reason you have to understand that is because in RGB, which is the way you see color on a computer screen, it has a much larger gamut or wider gamut than CMYK, which in simple terms means that there are colors I can see on my computer screen that can't necessarily be printed on paper. That's one of the most common misconceptions that people run into is they're looking at an image on their computer screen It might look really vibrant with neon greens and reds. They go to print it out, and the greens and reds are duller in color. That's because you've now experienced what we say is out of gamut. In other words, that RGB color was in a spectrum that can't be physically printed with ink on paper. Therefore, you're going to see a different color in your computer screen than you would ever see trying to print that color. That's called out of gamut. And obviously, we would want to make those corrections before we convert to CMYK. That way we see a true representation of what the image should look like once it gets printed. So again, these are your two color modes. One of the most important things to always do when you're working on someone else's file is take a look and see what color mode the file is currently in. Now to switch them, you just simply go up to the menu bar that we just referred to, which was image, mode, and then you would just choose the opposite color mode. So if I was converting an RGB file into CMYK, it would be image mode CMYK. So all you gotta do is click on it. Or vice versa, if I'm converting it from CMYK to RGB, same concept. I'm gonna go up to the menu bar to the word image, mode, RGB. But keep in mind, you always want to start off in RGB. That way you have full range of the tools that are available in Photoshop. And then once you're finished with all your editing and design, you then convert to CMYK. Now, one of the common questions is, well, what happens if I'm going to have the same photo on my website, but I'm also going to be using it in a brochure? Well, then you might actually need two files. One that's specifically for the web, and then one that's specifically for printing purposes. And so you would just do a save as, copy, make the adjustments, and etc. Which also brings us to another piece that creates two categories, and that is the type of graphics that we can work with.
Question.
Yeah.
If you start in RGB and then go to CMYK and then decide you need to make some more changes and you go back to RGB, does CMYK wipe out some of the stuff that you had in RGB?
No. So what happens is basically the colors correct themselves so that they are within gamut of CMYK. So when you convert back to RGB, the colors are still going to look the same. You're just now working in the RGB environment.
Thanks.
Yep.